16-year-old Sheila had been living with her parents, a typical British teenager in a bustling Midlands city. She was bright, youthful, and, as far as everyone who knew her could tell, nothing out of the ordinary. The day began like any other: chores, a bit of schoolwork, maybe meeting friends. Then she stepped out into the city center, and the world she knew simply vanished. She was last seen walking through Coventry's busy streets and was expected home that same afternoon. But she never arrived. Not at lunch, not by tea time, not ever again, at least not in any way her family could understand. Her disappearance was the kind that gnaws at the bones of a community. One moment she was there, the next she simply wasn't. No accident reported, no final message left behind, just silence. But why? And how could a disappearance so sudden fade into the shadows for over 5 decades? We're about to unravel that mystery, from frantic early searches to the astonishing end. And what happens next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about someone just leaving. Stay with me and consider subscribing. The truth is stranger than you expect. When Sheila didn't come home that afternoon, alarm bells immediately rang. Her parents reported her missing. Police launched searches, checking every corner they could think of: streets, bus stations, parks, sheltered corners of the city where a teenager might hide, run away, or seek refuge. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Even in an era without surveillance cameras, digital records, or mobile phones, investigators and community volunteers worked tirelessly. Posters were printed. Eyewitness appeals were made. Officers interviewed friends, neighbors, and strangers alike. There was one lead that made people pause. Some witnesses believed Sheila might have been involved romantically with an older man, someone an age or two above her own. The theory circulated quietly among investigators even many years later. Still, nobody could place her with certainty after that day. There were no confirmed sightings, no accepted trace in public systems, no record of her traveling abroad, or anywhere else for that matter. It was as if she simply evaporated from existence. And yet, she had family, she had friends, and she had a life that seemed worth returning to. Still, everyone hit the same impasse. Absolutely no trace. Questions piled up like snow in winter. Had she run away? Had she been hurt? Had something terrible happened in the shadows of that city she knew so well? Every suspected clue was followed and then dismissed. Back then, this was a cold case waiting to happen. And happen it did. Slowly, almost painfully. But what happens when hope fades? Stay tuned, because the story doesn't end in defeat. Decades ticked by. Sheila's disappearance became part of the annals of local mystery, a file gathering dust on a shelf where unanswered questions lived. Her name was among the longest unresolved in West Midlands police records. By the 1990s and 2000s, the notion that Sheila might one day be found seemed almost quaint. An old newspaper clipping in a forgotten drawer. Her parents aged, friends moved on or sadly passed away. No record showed Sheila in public databases, birth records, school years, employment, nothing. Her case entered a silence that few missing person mysteries survive. But then, something began to change inside the police department. A small, dedicated team was formed, the Cold Case Investigation Team. This wasn't about ignoring old files. It was about looking at them again with fresh eyes, new tools, and new determination. Detective Sergeant Jenna Shaw, leading this unit, would later describe their mission like this: every missing person has a story, and their families and friends deserve to know what happened to them. Even decades later, they didn't just leave cases in the past, they reopened them. And that decision would change everything. But what did they find? You might expect a missing persons case to hinge on a groundbreaking forensic test or a video from yesterday's CCTV. Not here. No, this twist came from something much simpler, and yet much harder to uncover in a case this old: a photograph. Turn the page and prepare for something you won't see coming. Imagine opening an old file after half a century, stacks of reports, witness statements dried like leaves, handwritten notes fading into pale ink, until a photo appears. Not a modern image, not something sharp or clear, but one taken around the time she vanished back in 1972. It was grainy, slightly out of focus, but it was Sheila, and it was enough. West Midlands police released that photo, not quietly, not just inside an office, but to the world. It went online. It went on social media. The public saw a face that hadn't been in the spotlight for 52 years. Then something remarkable happened. Within hours, people started calling. Emails, messages, tips from strangers who recognized that face, that look, that familiar expression from decades ago. Information came flooding in, not from old witnesses, not from archived records, but from the public. Neighbors, friends, people who had moved to new cities, new lives, folks who remembered. Suddenly, that long, cold mystery wasn't cold anymore, and the case took a turn no one saw coming. She was still alive, not a ghost, not a missing statistic, a living, breathing human being, somewhere in the country with a life nobody expected, a life no one knew about. This was where the story blindsided everyone. But how could someone disappear from sight for so long? That's what we uncover next. Hang on, you're not ready for the next twist. On January 1st, 2025, West Midlands police announced what had once seemed impossible. Sheila Fox had been found, and she was alive and well. This wasn't an identification of remains. It wasn't a heartbreaking closure. It was closure with a breath in her lungs. She had been living in another part of the country, the UK, not abroad, not hidden in some secret place, just elsewhere. Police spoke to her, confirmed her identity, verified her well-being. No violence, no tragedy, no evidence that she had been harmed or exploited. Just a woman, once lost, found. Detective Sergeant Shaw, reflecting on the resolution, said the breakthrough came from the team's relentless review of every piece of evidence, and then, crucially, from public collaboration. She spoke in quiet satisfaction about Detective Constable Sean Reeve, whose work in tracking down that lone photograph led to the media appeal that pinpointed Sheila's whereabouts. And within hours of releasing the photo, calls from people who knew something, people who had seen her, people who remembered, people who reached out. This is where we confront one of the most startling truths of the case. Sometimes missing persons are not missing in the way we assume. They're missing in the ways no one expected. And when the public joins the investigation, even decades-old mysteries can finally resolve. But here's the question hanging over every chapter of this story. After 52 years, the police have shared very little about why Sheila vanished in the first place. Some early reports suggested she may have been in a relationship with an older man, that she was living with her parents and possibly chose to leave of her own accord. There's no evidence of foul play, no sign of abduction, just the absence of explanation. She simply walked away from the life she had known. Maybe she sought something new. Maybe she changed her name. Maybe she preferred a life that didn't include the city she grew up in. Those possibilities linger. And yet, after all this time, the only detail we can say with certainty is this: she was found safe. And that's not something every cold case can claim. Years of unanswered questions, decades of speculation, a family left wondering, all answered not by technology, not by detectives alone, but by a single photograph and the willingness of ordinary people to step forward with what they knew. Isn't it wild how a story this long, this silent, this cold can finally become warm again with just one moment of recognition? Sheila's case, while unique, offers a powerful lesson. There are thousands of missing person cases around the world. Some vanish into the dark. Some are never spoken of again. Some become names on lists. But the resolution of this case shows a missing person can be found alive, even after half a century. Advances in police methods and public engagement can unlock decades-old mysteries. Sometimes the smallest piece of evidence makes the biggest impact. And for families who never stopped hoping, this is the story that offers real hope. Not closure through tragedy, but closure through presence. We may never know all the details of the years Sheila spent away, but we know this: she lived, she wasn't harmed, and she was found. That's the miracle at the heart of this case, the missing ending that became the found beginning. And for listeners who crave a story where humanity triumphs over mystery, this is that story. Consider subscribing to encourage us, and thanks for watching.